I am going to just give everyone a bit of time, a few more minutes just to get stuck in, and then we're going to be talking about future-proofing demand generation, and you're going to hear some secrets shared by this incredibly experienced panel that will help you drive success in your flex spaces over the coming months and years. And I suspect there'll be some things which are old favorites that we might hear about that haven't gone away in their importance. But obviously, as you've heard today, there's an evolving landscape. It's shifting, it's changing positively, I would say, in this part of the sector's favor. So we're going to talk around that, and it's going to be great. For those of you listening, first off, thanks very much for joining the session. Thank you very much for joining the event today as well. I've been in a few sessions that have found it really interesting, and it's great to participate. I'm Ben Munn. I am the head of Flex at JLL, and I've been in Flex in different forms for a while now. So this is a sector I love. Look at Inga nodding her head. Yes, she knows. That's right. So some of you may know me, some of you may not, but I look forward to meeting all of you virtually at some point. So I think we've given everyone enough time, and I've got the really easy task today, which is just sitting here and listening to three incredibly fantastic speakers share their wisdom and occasionally asking questions that we would all like answered. So on that point, please do use the chat or the Q&A. I'll be checking both so that we can make sure we cover all of your questions and we direct the conversation accordingly. As I say, it's going to be a wide-ranging conversation around the how you manage demand gen, what you can be doing to make sure that your customers and your future customers are finding you in the places that they're looking, and then of course we'll probably stray into how do you secure them and so on and so forth. So with that, I will shut up and I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. And I'm going to go around from on my screen, which may have no relevance to what you're seeing on your screen. So I'm going to start with Inga. If you could introduce yourself, we'll then go to Hector and then Ginger. And I'll ask Ginger to kind of kick us off with some thoughts when we get there. But Inga, if you can start by introducing yourself.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Inga Taylor. I started in flexible workspace about 20 years ago, actually as a client in a space when I left uni, and then took on an operations role and then went up through head office, new centre openings. When I started, the operator had 8 locations and I left, they had about 90. So we had grown a lot over time. I then worked for a second operator and spent some time in India, opening centres, as well as previously I've worked in France and Germany as well as the UK. And then I worked for one of the service providers to the sector. And in the last 4 years, I have set up OpsTech, and we now work with a variety of new entrants into the marketplace and existing operators, often with systems implementations such as Office R&D, also with compliance and different process management, and CRM lead generation, and trying to get new people into buildings.
Fantastic. Inga should have a session all to herself, potentially, as should each of you. Maybe we'll extend this for several hours. Hector.
I definitely would listen into that. Hi, I'm Hector Kolonas. I haven't been in co-working or flex for as long as my esteemed panelists, co-panelists, but I did get into co-working back in 2013 when I was in a little island called Cyprus and the whole entire market collapsed. And I landed up taking ad agencies that let go all their staff and turn them into kind of makeshift co-working spaces. From there, I kind of got pulled into the co-working world. I loved what you were all building. I loved the impact you were making on kind of your hyper-local economies. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I used to work in tech. I wanted to work in co-working, but I didn't want to run spaces. So I kind of looked at the different problems that co-working and flex faced. And one of them was definitely discovery. How do people find the right space? So I kind of played in the Airbnb for co-working world for a bit. Landed up then spinning up Included, which is the co-working perks program used by hundreds of co-working spaces around the world. And in those conversations, a lot of the operators I worked with were frustrated that there were so many opportunities to market their space and not enough time. So a year and a bit ago, I co-founded a company called Syncaroo, and we now automate the updating and syncing of data between all the marketing channels and booking channels and all of that stuff we're going to talk about now back into your management system, like Office R&D. So we're kind of doing that heavy lifting to make sure you can focus on members instead of kind of copy pasting from one place to another.
Fantastic. Great to have you on board, Hector. Thanks for sharing that your experience with us today. And Ginger, why don't you kick us off? And if I can ask you cheekily to introduce yourself, I know you're going to give us a bit of an overview of Upflex as well, which will be exciting. And maybe that's a good launch pad for talking about different channels, different opportunities for demand gen, and then we'll take it from there.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Ginger Dhaliwal, and I'm the co-founder and chief product officer for Upflex. I've been in the innovation space for over 15 years, looking at mega trends and how technology could enable it. And about almost 4 years ago, I worked from home. I had been working from home for many, many years. And I discovered that, working from home, there's all this benefits. I had the flexibility in the world. I could see my daughter, but I was working these crazy hours. And I was feeling that my career progression was stagnating. And so I got connected with my partner who owns 2 co-working spaces here in New York. And we started talking about, what does the future of the workforce look like? And how do we enable innovation to continue to grow within that workforce? And fortunately enough, we started thinking about a platform idea, and we got connected with Nokia's innovation team, who really had a need to have access to spaces where they could introduce their 5G and connect with startups that were building sort of high data demand applications. And through that interaction, we ended up starting Upflex. And so we've been working with enterprise companies for since 2017, thinking about their sort of approach to a distributed workforce and how technology can enable that. So today with Upflex, we work with large real estate companies like JLL and Colliers to really become the technology layer that enables them to provide hybrid solutions to their corporate clients. And, talking about, Ben, you were talking about the demand generation. There's been a shift, and Jamie Russo talked about this, that, previously, pre-COVID, a large portion of, most co-working demand was coming from freelancers and small businesses. And over the last 18 months, and especially in the last sort of 3 months, there's been a huge uptick in the number of enterprise companies wanting to experiment with new ways of work for their employees, and aggregators like us and people building hybrid solutions are a new opportunity for co-working operators to start getting an inflow of demand coming into their spaces that was from customers that they would normally not be able to attract as a single operator or small operator. Now they're being included in these larger RFPs for enterprise companies that are looking to provide access to their people across globally. And that access is in everything from tier 2 markets, tier 3 markets where people are migrating or where they live as opposed to commuting into an urban area. And that demand is expected to continue to grow as more and more companies. 70% of all corporates have said that they're going to be implementing some sort of hybrid work solution or strategy. And so that incoming demand is going to be tremendous for co-working operators to be able to process that inflow.
Fantastic. So when you think about that as a smaller operator, then getting kind of eyes on you as an option, particularly from an enterprise customer, is not the easiest thing in the world, right, to be considered within that. So what are the things beyond the technology that you're providing, Ginger, and being that solution? What are the benefits that you think your kind of operator network gains from partnering with a company like Upflex? And what kind of, and I think this will lead us into another part of the conversation, what kind of demand that they can monetize and create commercial opportunity from, should they expect to be seeing through Upflex and any others that may be doing something similar, but I'm sure not as well as Upflex?
The type of demand that we're seeing is companies today are experimenting. They're trying to change behavior because most of their employees have been living and working from home for the past 18 months. So what they're doing is they're offering their employees access to space, right, through technology. And what they're then doing is they're looking and measuring what that behavior patterns are. And so we're still at the early days in terms of what that demand would look like. But based on our data, what we're finding is that employees will pick 2 or 3 co-working spaces in their neighborhood that they would go on a regular basis. And over time, if there's enough collaboration of their teams using that space, then that can be converted into a long-term lease. And enterprises are able to see those data points, and they're able to now make better real estate decisions based on employee choice, as opposed to just figuring out, there's a distribution of employees, that area looks like the shortest distance. Now employees are basically, based on their on-demand access, they're able to then actually make choices that employees are really gravitating to naturally.
So you just described one of my old lives as a portfolio strategist, where we throw darts at a board to decide, kind of with the employees arrayed around it, to decide where people should acquire real estate. So you've got a seeding there, right? You've got the participation in that, so that people will come in and experience your offering, and then that could potentially lead to kind of longer term commitments. I think that speaks obviously clearly to what Jamie also talked about earlier, which was the importance of your proposition, right? So when someone comes in the door, are they going to come back? Are they going to stay, or are they going to turn around and walk straight back out? But we'll come back to that a bit later. Hector, I'm going to bring you in here, because obviously that kind of demand channel is one that our operator friends will be leveraging and be using, and give us a view of kind of the scale of the channels that you're supporting them getting their content to, and how you're helping them get their information out into the market.
Sure, great question. So it's worth noting on the topic of kind of corporate, not every space wants to house corporates or have pop-in or drop-in space. So it goes back to the whole idea of picking who you want to serve, and then figuring out how you're going to reach them, but how also you're going to bring them through what we call your hospitality stack or your operational stack. I speak to a lot of operators, both in my previous role and now in this role, and they always ask me, like, where should we be listing? Where should we be marketing? What should we be focusing on? And it does come back to who they want to reach. But I like to use this idea of what I call the operational stack. And that is, in the center of your business, it's always going to be hospitality. What can you do to treat your members, or give them tech, or give them seamless processes, so that once they're there, they want to tell other people about how amazing it is to be there? That's the core of your business, regardless of who you're marketing to. Outside of that, you have a sales layer, and that is kind of how you interact with the people who are actually swiping their card, or brokers who are bringing people in. A little bit outside of that, you have the lead generation platforms. So that's like the Upflexes, Deskbosses, et cetera of the world, who generate that interest, give you exposure into markets that you couldn't normally reach, bring you into kind of network effect paradigms, like the fact that a company needs access to multiple spaces and you might only run one. Things like that. And then outside of that, you have this mushroom of marketing channels, right? Things that are kind of normally unidirectional. You're sending messaging out, you might be interacting on social media, but it's not actually transactional. Now, all four of those layers have to operate together and seamlessly in a way that you can portray your message, your brand, your products, your matrix to the right markets. And two spaces right next to each other won't have the same operational stack. It's one thing to keep in mind when you think about anything with regards to your marketing, your lead generation, how you're going to attract members today, a year from now, and 6 years from now will be completely different to the space next to you. And that all comes down to kind of what you're offering, how you message it, and how you package it. I can dive into a little bit more about what's in each layer. Normally on the outside, you have the most platforms, most social media, Google Maps, all that stuff where people can find you. Then you have the kind of aggregator, broker booking platforms, your website where it's kind of transactional. Then your sales is slightly tighter. That's your CRM's layer. That's where you kind of communicate and you sign contracts and do that stuff. And then your hospitality. Once someone arrives at your door, regardless of where they found you on that stack, they need to be able to check in, be appreciated as a sole first-class citizen in your space, not feel like they're kind of an extra thing you signed up for. Nobody knows what to do with them. The meeting room they wanted is double booked. All these things need to be looked at in your hospitality layer, because it doesn't matter if you can bring in everybody and they get there and they turn around, as you said, and walk right out the door. You've hurt yourself because you then lose the secondary benefits of them telling their colleagues. We saw a use case or case study from WeWork last week where the Spotify team, or the Slack team, sorry, are the ones who are organizing the meetups within WeWorks. They're the ones who are organizing the pop-in days and doing that kind of stuff. So if you ruin the experience for one of those corporate members or one of those startups or one of those freelancers or one of the creator economies, you're losing that secondary benefit of them telling people in their network to come to your space.
Excellent. Excellent. So that raises for me some questions, because you've done some really important pieces of the puzzle, some really fundamental basics, which I don't think everyone always remembers, which is interesting, down to Google Maps. You also win a prize for being the first in the session, I think, to mention WeWork. Can someone go and check the stock price? Congratulations to them to listing. But a perfect kind of segue for me to you, Inga, because I think we think about what we're, the title of the session today is about future proofing. It's about thinking about what is changing, but also what isn't changing. And you have, I know, I'm fortunate enough to have known you for a while now. You've got this wonderful perspective on the industry, having been there, done it, but also looked into the future and worked with some pretty innovative companies. So I would love to hear you give us a view on some of the fundamentals that, excuse me, that aren't changing. That's a good. I think I'm getting attacked for being rude to Hector.
I'm happy to pick up then if you want to. Yeah. I mean, I think when I started in the industry, it was location, location, location was the original mantra about why people are choosing space. And I think that's still really important. But I think the culture of the space and the people, the staff and the clients is actually now more important. And that's what's going to drive the client retention and the client referrals, which is, I'm sure there are brokers on this call, but I've also been here long enough before brokers were properly established and we were all having to explain what this sector is about and what it does. But I think location is still absolutely paramount, but then it really is about the level of service and the quality of service and the people that are delivering that service. And so one of the reasons that I believe good systems and good tech and good amenities within the building is key, because it actually helps you to retain your staff. And I'm a great believer in also empowering the staff, and that's partly by giving them the right tools for the job and the right training, so the right software and things to make their jobs easier. But actually, if they're empowered to make decisions and they're not having to follow a robotic style, then the customers are genuinely happier. I've worked with a couple of operators recently that I would say have a more clearly defined client type. It's not necessarily the industry sector that they're in. It might be the size of the business that they're in. There's one client I'm working with that probably their smallest client is about 20 people, and they've got much larger offices going up. And it's much more of a drop-in development, shared tech, shared environment. And there's a lot more cross-company activity. And that the community spirit in the building is much more, it's not just my own colleagues from my own company that you see talking together, it's people talking cross companies and sharing that space together. And I think, you know, Ben, what you're saying about what's going to keep us ahead, you know, what's changed and what's the same. What's the same is still location and quality of building. I think environmental issues are going to become more and more important. And in corporates choosing workspace, I think the whole carbon offsetting, being able to report and track on their own waste and usage and monitoring. And actually, it's not something that traditionally flex space operators have done. We tend to aggregate and manage the services separate, you know, together and deal with rubbish or waste collection. Actually, we need to monitor the services and efficiencies within the building. And from conversations that I've had with corporates, they're more inclined to potentially pay for that service because it's key. But there's one client that I work with that everything, that all of their fit out and equipment is as sustainably provided and recycled as it can be. And that's one of their USPs to their own space. And they have a good partnership group, and all of their partners are all much more focused around sustainability. And that's a newer trend that, you know, 10 years ago, actually, as a globe, we weren't really thinking around those types of views of the world and how we're using energy and what we're doing with it. And I think COVID has fast-tracked some of these items. So I was also around after the 9/11 you know, devastation to the world and the Twin Towers and everything that's just had its anniversary. And you know, the impact that it had on the flex workspace then was really to see so many companies leave, but actually so many more new entrants and corporates who were taking spaces because they didn't want to commit to the same leasehold requirements that they had elsewhere, then coming in and taking flex space on a different proposal. And earlier, you know, the discussion about managed space and flex space and co-working, they all fit through that whole chain of managing a company through their lifetime of growth throughout the businesses. But yeah, I don't know if that's really answered the question, Ben, but I hope it's given some food for thought.
Yeah, you know, I just want to add to Inga, most co-working spaces, their websites just don't reflect any of those data points that companies or the users are interested in. And I think there's simple things that the operators can do is start leveraging some of that community information, those data points in terms of your sustainability mission. Those are becoming far more valuable in making a decision. I mean, we already today have a hard time even getting proper images of the space itself, which drives whether or not individuals or corporates are willing to even engage with your space. And so I think there's simple things that operators can do in terms of providing more information about their spaces that go beyond just a static website to help generate that demand from the types of a target audience that they're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And just to add to that, I mean, one of the most important things I think in the sector here is still doing physical viewings and actually going to see the space for yourself. And some of the clients that I've been working with have been doing virtual tours and using technology and software to give a much better online experience, either in a one-to-one viewing or actually just put it in some instances on their website. But I think that's key to get the look and feel and vibe and general ethos and culture of the space, and also to have the other clients base that's in there, because then if you've got some synergies with some of the people that you're going to be sharing most of your working day with.
That point around, and thank you both for stepping in, and also thanks to Shane. WeWork's value has not collapsed in the last 10 minutes. We'll all be pleased to hear. So Hector, thinking about some of those pieces there in terms of the content that you want to provide, the content you want to get in front of the customers that you're trying to target, the quality. I think, Ginger, you were talking there about some simple basics again, about like, do you have the right quality of the imagery that you want to share? Does it articulate a vision of your space and experience? And are you backing that up with the information that allows your customers or prospective customers to make an informed choice around you? Hector, there's a lot of things there, and that's just a piece of it. I love the way you talked about the different layers. What are some of the other elements that you think are important, and then how are you seeing customers get that out into the right places? Because that constant management feedback's got to be critical, right?
Yeah, sure. I've spent way too many years in software development, so I'm going to answer with depends. It all comes down to, as we said, a number of times, who you're catering for. If you're catering to kind of corporate, you have to be listed, you have to be sharing the data and the Wi-Fi speeds and the security infrastructure and your ISOs and all that stuff that's important to corporates through the channels that they're looking for you. But if we look at kind of what's happening with the rest of the world, with kind of the Great Resignation, people stepping away from their jobs, going freelance, creator economy booming, people launching Etsy stores, podcasting taking over, like everyone's got a podcast. Reaching these markets, you kind of have to look at how can you reach the people and show them what's important to them through the mediums that they're already using. So you can't expect to reach someone who's a huge podcaster in your city through a corporate booking platform. 90% of the times you're going to miss your target. So things that I've seen that are really creative in this space is you want to attract podcasters, you have a podcast room, give a discount to people to tell people in the podcast that they're recording in your space. Nothing spreads more well in these kind of small circles than someone who has an Etsy store sharing that the photos they took were in your media center in your space. Someone who is a WordPress developer, there's a great meetup happening at your space. So you have to kind of talk to where your market is already congregating instead of trying to splatter the same message to everyone. That kind of goes back to the website. If your space is great for WordPress developers, Etsy store owners, and podcasters, you should be trying to tell a narrative of we are a space, we're a community, but break your channels into bringing those people into whatever platform they're going to use to book in. If they're going to use multi-space, maybe they're going to come on Mondays to their podcasting and go somewhere else where it's quieter to do editing or whatever it is that kind of works for them. Now, the question you asked is how the hell do you maintain all these channels? That's the big challenge, right? If you've got a small space with 13 desks, it's fairly simple. Once you get to that capacity, you can maintain that, you can kind of keep that maintained. However, when you've got multiple locations in different cities, different clientele, different messaging, it all comes down to automation. How can you get the pieces to talk to each other so that your humans can do human-centric tasks? Greeting the person, making sure that everything is operating, doing things that need that human touch as opposed to letting computers do all the other stuff. And that goes back to what Ginger was saying. Yeah, you have great photos, but every website, every broker, every output wants a different size. They all want different dimensions. They want different file sizes, file types. If you're going to hire someone to do that just for your one set of marketing channels, let alone what you have to then put on Facebook, et cetera, that's 3 full-time jobs. How are you going to generate enough demand to pay for that and then still generate revenue from your space? And that's where I think the future is going. We're going to get to a point, and this is obviously why I'm heavily invested in the tech we're building, is to how do we do something once and then update everything? So right now you change a pricing or an availability or something in Office R&D, and everyone in Upflex knows because Upflex and Office R&D are both connected to Syncaroo. So that's just one example of where we're getting. You change your media in Upflex, in Office R&D, Upflex gets notified. You don't have to do the same thing twice. You're still creating value for both your Office R&D customers, but the people using Upflex see the latest imagery. They know the latest pricing. They're not going to arrive there and be told, oh, you owe $20 extra because the pricing was wrong, or whatever it is that normally happens, and we get those moments of friction. So yeah, it's all going to come down to automation. It's all going to come to kind of planning workflows and processes, and then kind of working towards trying to automate as many of them. And we're going to hopefully make that as easy as possible over the next couple of years.
And where do you think, in that regard, where do you think kind of brand and identity fit in? And obviously that works at very different kind of scales. But the dream often of creating something that is known, is recognized as providing a certain experience. How do you kind of allow for that when you're distributing through so many different routes, and how do you stand out I guess is one of the questions you would have.
Yeah, question. I know that I'm trying really hard not to say depends again. But if you are going for kind of corporate, they don't really care about your brand. They care about the experience and the usage, how they feel when they use your space. That will then get them, I think Mark mentioned it earlier in a previous talk, how if someone uses your space and it's bookable through the company's app or whatever they're using to book space, they will tell people to meet them there. So you got that kind of brand awareness. It's not directly, hey, you're booking through Hector's Super Space app, you're booking through Upflex or, Apple's remote working app or whatever it is. That's one piece. But the other piece, if you are targeting kind of to build that brand, to build that culture, the types of platforms and mechanisms and platform and channels you're going to use are going to be those that enforce your brand, the ones that allow you to give that messaging, to brand it, to send people back to your website. So it does come down to whether brand is that important for you as a space. If you're catering directly to corporates, Instant said there's a huge shortage of massive offices. They don't care about your brand. They don't care if you're a WeWork, Industrious, Notel, or Mini Space. As long as they can use your space and get a great service from it, they will then use you for additional services. So it's really tricky, and as I said, it depends on who you're targeting. With kind of more indie spaces, who are targeting really small communities or wider communities who care about the brand, care about the ethos, care about the social responsibility, you've got to kind of work with your platforms to get that messaging across, and tell the platforms what you want to show. You have the ability to ask for features. Don't be scared to ask platforms, ask Office R&D to add a sustainability section so that we can then sync it out to everyone else, right? You are the customers, so speak to your tech partners and make sure that you have that control of your brand and your messaging.
Ginger, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. This is where I turn into a news broadcaster. So some would say there's an inherent challenge between aggregating content where the scale of content, the number of locations and etc. drives demand towards you. And then some of those content providers want to be recognized as individuals. I'm sure it comes up in your conversations with operators that you're looking to onboard and so on. So how do you have that conversation? How do you see, what's your perspective on it?
Going back to brand, we know that based on, our early studies, even when we were speaking to Nokia, the community profile is really important because a lot of the brand of a co-working space is the community around you. And so that was a key data point that we started collecting early on about our co-working spaces, so that when we're making decisions, L'Oreal is interested in going to a co-working space where there's beauty and wellness startups, so that there's that cross collaboration and innovation that happens, and there's like the community can connect in both ways. And so when we think about brand, users are looking for consistency, and they're looking for hospitality. They're looking for, services that will enable the community to kind of connect. That goes beyond technology, right? Our job is to bring people to the spaces that they need to do the work that they want to do and be productive, but be around a community that represents who their belief systems and how they approach their life. It's like a lifestyle choice. And so if there is a way for operators to communicate that branding that goes not just beyond, everyone has beautiful chairs and great tables and, standing tables and monitors, but I think they're looking for that, the soul of your space as part of that branding. And that's really hard to, quantify. And I think, as operators are able to take that essence of their space and communicate it, are going to be really, really successful to the people that they're targeting. And so I don't know how you communicate that. We did it through understanding your community profile, but I think we just have to be a lot more creative in trying to express how that feeling feels when someone walks into your space.
I love that expression, the soul of your space. That is, and Inga, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to add that this is still quite a young sector, a young, sector really. But if you look at hotels or even retail stores and supermarkets, so in hotels, we've got a range from the cheap budget hotels to boutique hotels to corporate hotels, and you know the difference. And I know if I want good sports facilities or a swimming pool or a gym, that I'm better in one brand of hotel than another. And if I'm wanting to go on a holiday and have a different experience and relax, I'm going to pick a different location. And in the UK, it's the same with our supermarkets, our stores. There's everything from a Waitrose to an Audi at high level to the top to the lower level, and they all fit their purpose. And in a year, I might shop in a variety of them for different reasons. But where I put my home is different. And then, so that's what I think. There is absolutely room within the sector for different brands, cultures, service, price points, and it fits to different businesses at a different time. And I think what you were saying about familiarity or uniformity and confidence, actually in a bigger organization that maybe has a broader spread of employees and they want their employees to have the same experience across, a bigger operator that is going to be able to provide consistency of service throughout is going to be advantageous. There are some bigger providers. Some of you may have heard of the Office Group, otherwise known as TOG in the UK, which has a very good brand culture, completely different at the other end of the scale to a smaller one, Desk Lodge, which is much more co-worky and quirky, but has still an incredible vibe and drive and passionate, I would say, group of members that are part of their community because they're really believing in it. And I think that fit of the business to the workspace and designing your workspace and putting in the infrastructure in terms of people, systems, process to support the service that you're offering. But it is the customer that's key, and it is customer service that's key, and actually getting the data about your customers and knowing your customers, both from inquiries. So is it accountants and HR specialists you're attracting, or is it advertising agencies? Because then you can direct your marketing accordingly much better. And why are you losing business? What is it that you're not appealing to? So don't necessarily target those markets, or if you want to, then what do you need to change to target to a different upcoming sector? And it is that ability to keep seeing what's changing. What's the average size of your inquiries? Was it 5-person offices in 2020 and now it's 10-person offices? What's the trend happening? And then to be able to evolve your space. So actually combining data and customer experience and knowing your customers is probably the key to success, and continually doing that. It's just refreshing the whole time.
Yeah.
So I'd like to just, if I may, kind of follow up on some of those things with you, Inga, just quickly, because you raised the idea of brands, multiple brands within a market, but you kind of obviously within hotel brands and so on, they have a scale that the individual customer and even corporate customers kind of know the brand, and we don't necessarily have. There are probably a couple around the world that have that. One of them's been mentioned already on this in this meeting, that kind of have a level of awareness that a lot of operators don't have, but they might have within their market. You've been on a journey with one in one of your past lives where you went from a small number of locations to a really big network. What changed in that journey in terms of how you were generating demand? Did you see a shift from third-party sources? I mean, I know brokers were maybe not the biggest part of it, but towards more direct demand generation because you had repeat customers, you began to have a recognized brand. What does that shift look like? Or is it that you just do more of more demand gen across all of the channels because you've got that many more desks to?
I think when I started at a company called MWB that was acquired by Regis, we had 5 locations and they were out of London, on the sort of environs of London. So we had local agents and brokers, and it was very much a local market that we were servicing at the time. As we increased sites and we added some France, Germany and Holland as well to the portfolio, we had to work with larger agents and brokers of different sorts and attracted different types of customers. We worked quite a lot with the banks and the consulting houses, and we spoke with them directly and did different deals with them. But the channels, I suppose we also had dedicated teams that were more the corporate selling teams or the larger deals teams within our company, which was before it used to be very locally based, and then we had a much more property solution, let's work with you, a bit more of what Ginger's doing, I suppose. It changed to be in that way, and the marketing definitely had to be on a global scale. But whenever one of our larger competitors had a campaign in newspapers, radio, TV, it always benefited us. Leads always went up. So you know, that currently the sort of larger people that are out there in the market, any news is good news in this sector. And actually to still deal with the local niche markets, you know, you get a different type of service and experience. And sometimes you want to go where there's people that are actually living and working close to you. So the smaller providers that might have 2 or 3 centres in a smaller geographic area are perfect for you, but in a different corporate one, and if you're traveling around the country, you want to know that you've got the same consistency. So I think it is about, you know, who needs the space, and how long you're going to be spending in the space and how on the road you are. But the routes to market, I still am a great advocate of the self promotion, getting referrals, and if you're doing the right thing, you're providing good customer service and you're delivering it to the right customers, they will tell people and the news will spread. And it's much easier to, I actually also think the client retention with your own self-generated leads is probably, well, it's not probably, it is greater on average, looking at the stats, than some of the churn that you get from people that are actually just shopping more for price or location and just for the moment, and they're not necessarily there to stick with it, and it's not going to be their home. Really what you want to find is the clients that are going to make their home with you. I hope that's answered it, Ben, but it's quite a big question.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what we're here for, right? To deal with the big questions. But no, that was great. Ginger, I think you wanted to, I interrupted you.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that we're seeing is from the demand side is that corporates are having a number of mix of products, right? They want something long-term, they want something on demand, they are looking for something every week, twice a week for a team of 12. You know, we've gone so far as having, you know, one client, one corporate that's looking to host meetings twice a month for 15 people, but they were looking for a space that could also offer an opportunity for after the meeting sessions, right? So not only you can leverage your existing space, but you can leverage what's around it. So every time they go and have a meeting, they also have a session with laser tag that's around the corner from the location. And so experience, you know, when we're thinking about creative ways and building brand, you know, today when you go to Airbnb, they have a little booklet of the things that you can do around the neighborhood, or there's an understanding that it's not, you know, people are looking to work and they're looking to play. And if you can orchestrate the work and the play part, I think that also helps create loyalty for you know, people coming to your space for the first time in large groups.
Love that. I love that. That speaks to something we talked about in one of our warm-up sessions, in terms of talking about the way an operator can kind of make it easy, reduce the friction to integrate some of those things, so that they, I think, build not only the you know, your seekers' appreciation of what they are, what makes them special, try to communicate some of the soul, but it's not just the soul of their space, but it's also part, Inga, you've talked about it a lot, the location, and how do you make the most of location. So I think we've just layered even more activity onto them. Hector, help us out. How are they gonna deal with it?
Depends. No, I'm joking. It does come down to just knowing your clientele, right? It does come down to knowing your neighborhood. I've loved working over the last 6-ish years with kind of co-working spaces that are ingrained in their local community. They know the mom and pop shops around the corners. They know the local pub owners. They know, where you can get a good meditation session or yoga session after hard days of work. And building those relationships allows you then to present that. One of the things is people want to definitely work, they want to play, but they also want to eat, right? Knowing where they can get great food at affordable prices, especially, I remember when I was working from co-working spaces in London, you had either Pret, which is like a chain of like sandwich shops, or you had to find like these little mom and pop places where like, if you know, you know. And the beautiful thing I liked about going to some co-working spaces is the community manager, the people who work there, the onboarding process told me about that. So some of the spaces had automated that. It's the first time I've logged into a space. They've seen that I'm a new user. Hey, it's almost lunchtime. It's 11 o'clock. Send me an email or a message on my member portal saying, hey, these are some suggestions around the corner. We already arranged discounts for this, this, and this, or this is what we recommend for this kind of food. It's really, really simple things to automate once you've got the content, once you've got that reach and that network. But it all comes down to doing the work, right? You can't really automate guessing what's around you, because then you're just telling them to take out Google Maps and search. Whereas if you kind of put in that work, like you just said, with kind of the Airbnb hosts that are kind of super hosts, they look at how they can take that to the next experience, how they can provide that content, and then it comes down to automating the hell out of it. Basically figuring out how you can get that message in front of people without your staff having to do that. And that's when it's going to become critical, especially if you want to be able to have different type of products to different type of markets, to different type of users. It all comes down to how you segment that and then automate it.
There's a really interesting thing we've talked about, obviously, the knowledge of brands, the experience, the data, how that leads to buying decisions. We've talked about the channels that you can use to leverage them. The sector feedback loop, which was interesting. Oh, we have a new attendee. Fallen asleep, as far as I can tell, Hector, which is probably my fault. I'll shut up and your dog will wake up. But I think Mark mentioned it earlier, right? In that some of the platforms, are able to provide, user commentary, ratings, etc., which then increases. And I think, Ginger, it was you that was talking about, you talked about consistency, I think, and confidence, right, in how you make the decisions. So you have low risk decisions where if you're looking for drop-in spaces and so on, but the longer you want to commit for, the higher risk the decision, the more important the decision. Inga, you talked about the idea of home and how important that is. So I'm going to have a spend. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Ginger, on that kind of broader piece of kind of feedback loops and what operators should be doing and how they should be seeking feedback and so on. But before I let you jump in there, I just want to remind the audience, we're coming up close here on 9 minutes left in the session. So if you do want to ask any questions, do shout, put it in the chat, put it on the Q&A. If there is anything that we haven't spoken about that you'd love to get the panel to talk about, do it now. We're not struggling to fill the time, as you know, but I do want to make sure that you have the chance to have your voice heard. So there we go. With that, Ginger.
Yeah, within our platform, we do have, just like Uber, you make a booking, we collect data about the experience, and we share that experience. We could do a better job. We're not, I think we as technology enablers could do a better job in communicating more back to the operators in terms of feedback about the experience, feedback before someone makes a booking, right? Where did they abandon the search on the application? Was it while they were looking at a picture? Maybe the pictures didn't exist. Was their description not interesting enough. So in that sense, you know, as a technology company, building out those types of feedback loops is definitely something that we need to do a better job of, and making sure that operators understand where they may need to sort of increase that, pay attention to, you know, simple things make a big difference if someone hasn't visited your space, and being able to provide that. I think simple things like being able to call a space, you know, being able to call and ask questions prior to visiting seems to be a really important kind of functionality. But the problem is when people call, no one answers, or you know, it's and those types of we'll have to figure out automation. Hector, you might have to create an like a Google bot that answers, you know, automates that answering process. But I think you know, users are looking for information before making a decision, and if we can track when those failures or those drop-offs happen, I think that would help operators be more successful and understanding where those opportunities for improvement could be, as well as getting the feedback of, you know, the experience back to the operators in a more automated process. And that's where Syncaroo can play a huge part.
And we definitely will. But yeah, on that note, there's also that feedback loop. There's one thing that I've asked a whole bunch of co-working spaces operators about, and very few do it, and it's exit interviews. If a team is graduating for your space, i.e. they're too big or they're left for whatever reason, take them out for a coffee, find out why they're leaving, and see how you can address it. How can you extend the lifetime value of a customer, the retention rate? A lot of people just let the customer leave without finding out, where are they going? Did they get a better deal? Is it price sensitivity? Is it market sensitivity? Did they move houses? Can you introduce them to a space that's near them and get reciprocal feedback or, you know, leads from another space? There's so much that you can do by just having a coffee with a person. And that's kind of why I'm so driven to kind of remove the boring, tedious stuff from operators so that they can do this really important work of finding out what is critical, what is affecting your bottom line, is speaking to your users. And speaking and finding out and getting that feedback back from the platforms, and not, you know, copy pasting from one place to another.
I just want to add to that. I think it really is important to listen to the customers, but it's important to do it through their whole time. So, you know, I would advise people on a good process of account management. So there's pre-move-in meetings, there's move-in meetings, the first week, the first month, there's formal and informal throughout their time. But it's watching and listening. You know, are they in the office more? Are they in the office less? It's actually being observant and just knowing what the pattern is for each of the different customers. Are they booking more or less meeting rooms? And it's actually one of the reasons I talked about empowering the staff. But I'm not a great fan of necessarily centralizing processes, but giving the right people the tools to do the jobs locally. Because if I'm responsible as a community manager and I'm doing the billing and I see the revenue going up and down for a particular client, or I'm engaged in the meeting room usage or not, I start to spot those early warning signs of what's going on with that customer's business. And are they growing? Are they outgrowing it? Are they changing it? They seem to be out of the office more. And you can actually then have those informal conversations before it gets to the end stage. One of the customers that I work with that fitted out a new building that was due to open in May last year, obviously didn't, and then opened in July-ish, and still probably isn't really as occupied as it should be. But even in the early feedback from people that were in the building, there's been a complete new suite. There was some building work still going on, of meeting rooms put in, a recording studio, a podcast room, because that was the feedback from the people there initially of, actually, we need more. We might be having our own office space, but we need more smaller spaces, and we need some more spaces dedicated to doing certain types of work in these spaces. And they've been able to adapt, because they were still in that final phases of construction, to do that. But that was based on listening to the customers and actually being able to just engage and watch the customers around the space and go up and ask them questions. Why are you always sitting in the breakout space?
Fantastic. Well, that's brilliant. That's a brilliant segue, actually, to a question that has come in from Christina. And my challenge to the panel here is that you can't answer depends. although it's quite an open-ended question. So Christina says that their space is about to make some big changes and updates. And what do you think should be the most kind of important change to focus on? Now, we can choose to interpret this around being physical spaces, building on what you were just talking about, Inga. Are there things that we're seeing are working particularly well? Or you can interpret it whichever way you like, but you get a minute each on this if you need it, and then we're going to wrap the panel. So, Ginger, what would your advice be?
You know, I think, and Jamie talked about this earlier, really understanding the product mix, right? People want to consume space very differently than they did before COVID, right? Private offices, meeting rooms, desks. Now people need more products, and Expansive and Industrious are doing a great job in trying to understand what their target market users need. You know, some of your users may need, you know, part-time access to a desk. Some of your members may need access to your space, but another space when they're traveling. And is there an opportunity for you to retain that member? So really thinking about the product mix that you're offering and being a little bit more creative than what we've traditionally seen in co-working.
Great. Hector?
Feel attacked about my depends, but no, I would say it's mostly about assessing kind of what is working, what isn't, speaking to your current customers, speaking to the ones that have left, figuring out why they joined or why they didn't join, chasing up with those folks who came for a tour and never booked or never came back again, and then kind of figuring out a way to experiment as lightly and as quickly as possible. List on new platforms. You never know what Upflex is doing in your area, right? So by not listing there, you could potentially be losing the opportunity of income or attention or new customers that could be coming through their platform. And the same goes for every other platform. Obviously, I would say list with everyone, but you've got to find a way that makes sense for you. We are working really, really hard on making it really, really simple, essentially 2 clicks to join any of these aggregator platforms. And until that is a reality in early next year, try and figure out what is the lowest hanging fruit. What can you experiment with? What has come to your area? What is being used in areas around you? And try and see if you can get a new kind of mix of people coming into your space, new opinions, new feature requests, new product requests, and adapt like that.
Great. I'm afraid, Inga, you've got to answer it in 2 or 3 words.
I'll be very quick. Differentiate from your competition. Go and visit them. Do what they're not doing if you want to be bold. And secondly, good furniture that's flexible, because the walls within your space, that one room might be called an office today, could be a meeting room tomorrow. If you've got good furniture, you can change the use of the space quickly.
Fantastic. Everyone, thank you so much to Inga, to Ginger and Hector. It was a brilliant session. Thank you very much to everyone that joined. The recording will be made available. Ask questions after the session. We'd be delighted to join it. Thank you all for participating in Flex World, and look forward to the next session. Thanks all. Thank you very much.
Bye.